Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for a quick legislative update by our good friend Luis Morante. I'm not going to talk too long, so we can just get right into it. A lot of exciting stuff happened this week on the legislative front, and we want to make sure you have up-to-date information and know kind of what to expect next. So with that, by all means, I'll be looking at the chat box for Q&A and questions, and Louis will as well. And we will try to do our best to answer all the questions that you have in the time that we have. Obviously, you always have the opportunity to email Louis and or myself directly to follow up with any additional questions. And with that, I will kick it over to Louis.
Hey everyone, thank you Constantine. Thanks for hosting us today. So this will be a more informal discussion, I hope, than some of our past sort of webinars that you've been on. Kind of just wanted to talk through some of the big things that are happening in the legislature this week, or that happened this week, and kind of forecast some of the stuff that's coming up. So I think we'll start maybe with the AB 3155 hearing, actually, just in case, because I think that'll be a shorter conversation, but also just to leave some time for Q&A on the Senate housing sort of production package. We'll talk about both today, but I definitely want to focus on the second. So I thought I'll get the quick one out of the way first. So thanks again to everyone who joined. For those just joining, we're going to talk about what's been going on in the legislature this week, forecast a little bit about what's going on next week and in the weeks to come. We're going to talk about the 3155 hearing, AB 3155, and the Senate production package. As a reminder, you can ask questions in the Q&A or the chat or whatever. Some people text me. I'm not good about checking that right now, to be honest. But anyway, feel free to ask questions as we go along, and I'll try to just answer them live. So thank you to everyone who joined us for the AB 3155 hearing. It was a big victory getting that bill out of the committee. We had 65 folks show up in support against 41 no's. I was really bummed that most of the no's were from union folks instead of the NIMBYs that we heard were going to show up for the hearing. I guess that's kind of good that they can't organize that well, but never like being in the position of like being on the other side of an issue as labor. So one of the situations there is that our understanding is that labor, the context here is that labor has been opposing every bill that even sounds like CEQA. And so we had worked really hard with them to try to resolve their concerns. The author amended the bill significantly to address most of their concerns. We were sort of just like stuck on the SB 35 piece of that bill because we couldn't clarify what their concerns were. And as you heard from Chairman Chu, the stated concerns that they provided in committee were not sort of, there's no textual basis for them in the bill. It sounded like their concern was with existing law, and that existing law was one that they supported as a bill. So we were kind of flummoxed. We were befuddled. Thank you for entertaining me, for being able to say that. So definitely open to questions on that. We're going to revisit those conversations with them in earnest in this upcoming week. See if we can try to resolve some of their concerns. The context here is that, like I said, they're opposing every bill that sounds like CEQA. It sounds like they're doing that sort of as a strategy of like, just trying to contain all the potential harm that they might come to, but we feel pretty strongly that this bill is not one of those that could potentially harm them, in part because the reason that we picked, or the reason that the author went with the 10 unit number was existing law already says that 10 unit or below projects aren't projects that need to provide prevailing wage or project labor agreements, which are sort of typically what labor asks for to get SB 35 streamlining. And so we said we're not gonna touch the piece of this bill that labor most heavily negotiated on. And so we were kind of we were kind of bamboozled, if I may, when they came in with opposition, sort of on that apparent pretext that we were touching that portion, even though we weren't, which sort of, everybody was, the chair was on the same page about. Anyhow, so I might stop there on AB 3155. It's, in my estimation, the most important bill in this legislature right now for housing production. I think we'll sort of see we'll kind of see how the production package from the Senate evolves, but frankly, I still think 3155 is the biggest bill there, and so you can probably expect some sort of calls to action from us over the future months as the bill progresses through the Assembly and then hopefully through the Senate. You can expect some future asks from us for action around 3155. Okay, so from Henry, I got a question. I get it that there are misunderstandings with the trades, but is the real problem that remains to be resolved the prevailing wage issue? Thank you, Henry, for that question. Not really, because, and this was what Assembly Member Chu was saying during the committee hearing, the prevailing wage issue is one that we feel like is resolved by existing law. It's one that they have in the past said is resolved in existing law. And in our negotiations on 3155, they never actually said that they wanted prevailing wage for these projects. They just said there's a potential that it could harm the trades. And so, we had a really hard time sort of sussing out what their actual concerns were to then respond to them. But we're definitely very interested in responding to those concerns. It makes me personally very anxious to be on the other side of labor because we want to be their friends. They're key partners in housing production stuff generally. And so definitely, we're gonna try to revisit those conversations, and hopefully the sort of lull that will occur after a Senate housing hearing on Tuesday will give everybody some more breathing room to have those conversations in a sort of longer way, in a more thoughtful way. So we're really interested to pick those conversations with them back up. So I'm going to, I think I hit that one. Yep. Okay. Cool. Okay, so let's talk then about the Senate production package. Aaron, I see you are on the call. Aaron Eckhouse, if you wouldn't mind seeing if you can find a way to send the document that I'm about to share with folks on the call, either now or later. It's the Senate Housing Production Legislative Package fact sheet. I'm going to start sharing it. I'm going to start screen sharing it right now, and we'll just talk it through. And oh wait, host is disabled screen sharing. Constantine, can you turn that back on? Sorry, everybody, we're having tech difficulties. But we can just sort of start talking it through now. And hopefully it'll arrive in your inbox if you registered for this event. Okay, so housing production package. As folks on this call will be aware or remember, the Senate President Pro Tem, Toni Atkins, she promised that after the demise of SB 50, she would revisit the concept of production legislation with her colleagues, come up with a robust proposal that she would then announce as a consensus proposal and then kind of move that one forward, sort of acknowledging the defeat of SB 50 and saying it's not enough to do nothing. We have to do something. We have to figure out what we can do this year. So there are 3 or 4 main components of the package. We'll just take them in order, and then if I can share my screen with you eventually, we'll try to do that.
Hey, Louis, go ahead. You can share your screen.
Thank you, Constantine. Your godsend. Okay, so boom, boom. Okay, I gotta close that so we can zoom in a little bit. Okay, so this is the fact sheet for the package. Aaron, thank you so much for sharing that. I can answer questions, like we'll just kind of go bill by bill, and I can answer specific questions about each bill. So like, don't hesitate to put those questions in the Q&A, and we'll make sure to respond to each one. Okay, cool. So the first and perhaps the most exciting piece of this package is going to be SB 1385 from Caballero. This bill will allow a housing project to move forward if it is if it is in a zone for commercial use or office use. That's important because there are a lot of like underutilized commercial parcels in California, and you know, a lot of those are prime land for housing along the peninsula. For example, in the Bay Area, there's a lot of commercial zoning right next to single family zoning, right next to jobs. That could be great for high density housing. There's a lot of commercial zoning in LA that's underutilized along the boulevards. And so, you know, we're hopeful that this is going to be something that will make a meaningful difference in those areas or places like them. You know, this is something that LA currently does. So it's not going to change, for example, the city of LA's current policy. But I just wanted to clarify that for the folks from the city of LA on the call. But, you know, places like at Santa Monica, that type of situation, Orange County, I could see this being pretty effective. So let's scroll down. These are the requirements for using the bill. One of the challenges here, I know from my conversations with some of the Sacramento YIMBYs in our local group here, is going to be the density requirement here. So the core of the bill, what it does is it says you can build housing in commercial zones. It doesn't preempt any of the design or density or parking restrictions that local governments put on them. But it does say that the housing has to be at least dense enough to be affordable subsidized housing under housing element law. Folks on the call may know, but I just kind of want to go over it, what that means is the housing has to meet or exceed the Mullen density limits for whatever jurisdiction that you're in. The short way of understanding that is if you're in a metro area, so like in LA, for example, it has to be at least 30 dwelling units per acre. If you're in a suburban place, it means 20 dwelling units per acre. I know that one of the challenges from the Sacramento region for current implementation of this bill is going to be that a lot of local jurisdictions zone to the minimum as their maximum. So a lot of jurisdictions in the Sac Metro region that are required under housing element law to provide sites that are eligible for low-income housing, they zone them for 30 dwelling units per acre. So it's conceivable that this bill could only be used on projects in the Sacramento Metro region. It's conceivable that it could only be used on projects that are exactly 30 dwelling units per acre. This is something that, again, is just kind of come up in conversation with some of the folks that I organize with here in Sacramento. But you know, it's something that, you know, this isn't the final version of this bill either. So, you know, fingers crossed, this is something that we can kind of resolve and sort of see if there's a way to make it a little bit more permissive. So yeah, so this kind of follows up on something that Senator Caballero's been trying to do for a while. She's had a couple of bills in the past to try to zone, or rather to try to streamline through CEQA projects that try to convert commercial, like dead or dying malls, to convert them to housing. This is not a streamlining proposal; it's a zoning proposal. It's a zoning change. I think it's something that could potentially be quite catalytic, but the details here are going to matter, and we're going to have to get them right. But, you know, this office is one that's, you know, Senator Caballero supported SB 50. She's very pro-housing. And so I have my fingers crossed that we'll be able to make an effective argument around some of the challenges here. So I'm going to pause and just flip back to the Q&A to see if there are any questions coming in, although for some reason I'm having a hard time pulling you up. There we go, Q&A. Okay, no questions. So again, feel free to ask any questions about any of these bills as we're going through them, but don't hold anything back for sure. Okay, so the second bill in the package, and one that, you know, California YIMBY has definitely been a big supportive of, like the concept of in the past, is SB 1120 from Senator Atkins. She's going to be the author of this bill. It's going to be like one of two bills that she's actually going to carry this year. So that's exciting. Like, it's always good to have the pro tem carrying a bill. This bill will allow an addition, like in a single family zone, it'll allow duplexes. So it'll allow an additional primary unit One of the challenges is that you won't be able to use an existing ADU law on the same site. So you couldn't like build a duplex and then build an ADU in the backyard. This is going to be the portion, for example, that we were most excited about in SB 902 from Senator Wiener. That bill is going to be changed. We're going to talk about that bill in a second. But basically, where SB 902 would have allowed up to 4 units on a parcel in jurisdictions around the state, sort of like notwithstanding local zoning, this will allow 2. Again, like kind of some sort of, kind of concerns about like the standards that we're going to be putting on these buildings. I think this one is actually going to be probably one of the most onerous and one of the biggest limiters to its potential use, that you won't be able to demolish more than 1 wall. I sort of like, I think you can still probably do a duplex with a major internal renovation, but the fact that you can only demolish 1 of your 4 walls to expand the building may limit the bill's application in a lot of places. So that's something that we're going to try to like get more information about. And if there are similar programs that you're familiar with in your local area that operate in the same way, I'd love to hear about your experience of them working or not working to kind of inform how we're able to sort of advocate around this particular provision of the bill. Unlike SB 50, unlike its quadplex provision, this will be applicable in the coastal zone. So that's good. They are excluding some of the sensitive areas, the environmentally sensitive areas from like SB 35. So, we're making sure, for example, this is going to be like infill housing rather than sprawl, which is good. That sort of thing. Question, does it provide any additional FAR or setback relief? My understanding is that it does not. It seems like a condition of using the program is that it meets objective zoning and design standards around height and setbacks. Ostensibly, it wouldn't have to meet the zoning standard that says only 1 family can occupy the parcel. But we actually haven't seen bill language for this. I haven't been able to review bill language for this particular bill yet. But it would just it would be a very inconsequential bill if it had to meet local standards around the number of families that could live on the parcel. There just sort of wouldn't be a point. It wouldn't do what it alleges to do. So I trust that they will actually do that. But it seems like FAR setbacks, that kind of thing, are going to be ones that the project proponent will be expected to meet. Okay, moving along. The bill will also allow ministerial lot splits. This is something that we've advocated for in AB 3155. There's a real benefit here to home ownership because lot splits, let's take a step back. Lot splits are when a parcel owner has 1 piece of land that they want to cut essentially into 2 legally distinct pieces of land. There are different types of lot splits too. Sometimes you have to split a lot and create what's called an airspace map for condo projects that occupy all 1 piece of land. And so that is a discretionary process at the local level and can take up to 6 to 9 months, in my understanding from the developers that I've talked to about it. So it's a real incentive to building for rent housing rather than for sale housing, because rental housing doesn't have to go through this. We're talking about the same building, just slightly different uses. And so this will potentially help on home ownership, middle class home ownership, which is an exciting proposal. Some of the challenges here are going to be. There are going to be some challenges here. For example, that the lot be equal size is going to be somewhat of a challenge on odd-shaped lots, and potentially on corner lots too, depending on how the building is situated. It seems like somewhat of an arbitrary requirement. So I'm intrigued to see what they actually write into the text of the bill about why they sort of want this and what exactly they're envisioning. But there's also a larger question here of how much this is going to help. existing law already allows a non-discretionary ministerial lot split for up to 4 lots. That's through the Subdivision Map Act. It's something that like planning agencies around the state have pretty broad familiarity with. It's actually something that like I know in Sacramento we use here in my neighborhood of Midtown quite frequently. And so it seems somewhat like less attractive than existing law. But again, I am intrigued to see what the bill language is, and I have my fingers crossed that this is something that will eventually go further. Cool. So maybe I'll just take a breath there and drink some water. And if there are any other questions from anyone on the call, feel free to send them my way. Okay. Moving along. SB 995 from Senator Atkins. So, again, like really encouraging her to see her carrying these bills. Is going to reform or streamline through CEQA a different class of projects. So existing law allows certain projects that are valued above $100 million to get streamlined through CEQA. So they don't have to do all the environmental review. You're probably familiar with some of the, for example, like stadium loopholes the legislature has created through CEQA. This is similar in spirit to that. And what SB 995 will propose to do is to reduce from 100 million to 15 million that figure for triggering your applicability. 15 million is like a pretty decently sized project, but some of the developers that I've talked to about this are concerned that it's kind of the opposite direction of what we should be doing. When you look at projects that are really at risk from not moving forward because of environmental challenges, especially specious environmental challenges, it's really the small projects, like the small infill projects, the duplex, or I'm sorry, the quadplex, for example, that I'm living in now, is one that, is particularly in need of streamlining. It's why we're supporting AB 3155 as much as we are, in part, because it's those projects that really need the most help and are also some of the most naturally affordable projects to come online. That it's one of the best tools we have in our toolbox. This will be helpful for affordable, subsidized, deed restricted affordable housing, but it's unclear to me how this will be additive to the streamlining currently available for deed restricted affordable housing through Senator Wiener's SB 35. That sort of has had dramatic success in especially the subsidized deed restricted space. And so hopefully this is, I have my fingers crossed that this will be helpful rather, for those projects, but I don't have enough detail to share with you at this point to talk about that. And then the threshold here, the 15% IZ is a reduction from the IZ that's typically required for using SB 35. Especially in places that are meeting their annual progress, so their sort of annual progress report goals for above moderate income housing. The IZ there, the inclusionary zoning requirement to use SB 35 is 50%, and that can be onerous, and is one of the reasons that we've only seen 1 or 2 major projects move forward under SB 35 for the private sort of non-subsidized element there. So this 15% could be catalytic for streamlining there, and that to me is sort of the biggest benefit of this particular bill, is sort of clearing the way for streamlining for market rate units in areas of particularly high costs, like San Francisco and LA. And then, as I mentioned, SB 902 is going to be included in this package. That's exciting. SB 902 is going to be amended, though. So there are currently two main portions of SB 902. One is that quadplex provision. Like I mentioned, that's going to be taken out and put into the pro tems bill and refined down to the duplex level. The second portion of SB 902 is, I think, something that local governments should find very attractive, and I think many do. It allows a local government to pass a zoning ordinance that zones up to 10 units. You know, in individual sites, you know, you can, you know, you just can't, you can zone for tons of units, but they have to be in like sort of 10 unit buildings in sort of infill areas. And the benefit to local governments from this authorization is that the actual ordinance adopting that zoning change will not be a project under CEQA, meaning that the zone change itself could not be sued by litigious neighbors. It doesn't change anything about the actual project streamlining, though, which I know it's going to be an important part of the conversation for a lot of enviros and for labor. But this I think strikes a really, this is going to be a very valuable tool for local governments that have the intent to comply with their existing housing element law requirements. You know, I think something that like I've heard from the folks at Abundant Housing LA is that there are a lot of coastal communities in LA, for example, wealthy beach cities that have never gotten more than 5 units of housing a year, that are now getting thousands, and they feel like they're in between the rock and the hard place of, on the one hand, not complying with state law and losing a ton of funding, and on the other, their constituents, their neighbors. My hope is that this is a tool that solves that problem for them, that they sort of lean on it to comply with state law. It's at least one that's going to be available to them. And so that's good. That bill is up for its first hearing, by the way, on Tuesday in Senate Housing. Okay, yeah. SB 1085 is a bill from Senator Skinner, a longtime housing champion, of course. That bill proposes to enhance density bonus law by making it more permissive and by including, in certain circumstances, moderate income housing as a goal of the program. That'll be helpful, I think, in places like her district in particular. And I think it's, you know, like sort of past changes to to density bonus law, moving in the direction of more permissiveness in DBL is usually associated with increases both in the total number of units that are being built and in the increases in the number of deed-restricted units that are being built. So I have my fingers crossed about this bill as well. Okay, I'm gonna stop there because I've been talking for a while and I haven't gotten a question yet, and I want one. No questions, fine. Be that way. Sorry. Okay, so last in this package is a sort of yet to be announced budget proposal for direct assistance to tenants. Putting on my sort of like, you know, where I think this is going hat is it's probably going to be something like the current SB 1410 from Senator Lena Gonzales out of Long Beach and LA. Her bill would provide, I can't remember now, I think it's up to I think it's 250 million. I can't remember what the actual dollar figure is off the top of my head, but would provide money to tenants and landlords who volunteer to be in the program. Rent would go down and the state would pick up a lot of lost rent from people who can't pay because of COVID. The landlords are supporting that bill. There has been some concern from the tenant community about that bill. More than one organization is now opposing that bill because it's not mandatory for landlords to participate in that program. But mandatory participation could run afoul of the takings clause of the United States Constitution and would put the program at significant legal uncertainty or risk of it, you know, and create legal uncertainty. So while it would be great, I think, for the program to be mandatory, I'm not sure that making the program mandatory as a function of this bill is the right step. But if you have strong views about that, definitely feel free to reach out to me. And if I'm wrong about the takings clause, I would love to know, I would love to know that. And so while the pro tem has not said that SB 1410 is going to be the bill that's in the package, Lena Gonzales participated in this caucus effort that created this housing package. And so I mean, it would make sense if her bill is eventually the one that gets crowned as this particular piece. It's really critical that the pro tem is saying that she wants to spend money on this activity, because she has a significant influence on the state's budget, obviously, and the budget is significantly more constrained this year than we all thought it was going to be. The governor, announced a $54 billion shortfall in the budget, and so I think trying to figure out where this money is going to come from is going to be critical, but just the commitment to finding it is probably the most important piece. So it's exciting to see that she's doing that. Okay, cool. I got some questions. Thank you for those who asked some questions. So Krista Jeffries asks, why did the fourplex item get moved to Atkinsville instead of staying in Wieners? I don't know. I wish I had an answer to that question. It's one that we're trying to get information on now, but the best answer I can give you now is I don't know. And if we find something, I can follow up with you. Sorry. Okay, Anthony asks, while these 5 bills all seem to be useful individually, it's hard for me to view the housing production package as anything but underwhelming, especially since Newsom and Atkins had touted 2020 as the year of housing production. Do you have insight into whether there's a path towards strengthening these bills or to adding other bills to the package? If so, how should local YIMBY groups help to advocate for these improvements? That's a great question. This is what California YIMBY has been communicating in slightly different words to legislative leadership as well. We put out a statement, welcoming this package. I don't think it's harmful for sure, but questions remain, I think, among a lot of YIMBYs about how helpful this is going to be. And I agree that this does not really rise to the bar of this is going to be the year of housing production. Now, granted, that was all said before COVID-19 hit, and so that's substantially shifted. What the priorities are for legislators and for the state in general. So I'm sympathetic to that being the case. As to how local YIMBYs can help the most, I think there are 2 things that we should be doing around the state. One is making sure that the message that we need production, that we need more homes, just keeping that message up. I think it'll be attractive to legislators to say that we passed this package and it's done, but we should not we should not allow, not necessarily not allow it. We should not engage in that. That's, if this package passes, that's good, but it's not enough. It's not going to solve California's housing crisis. SB 50 wouldn't have solved California's housing crisis. And so we're going to need to keep our advocacy up. We're going to need to be engaged in those housing element fights. We're going to need to be engaged on project by project fights, as folks have in the past, showing up and saying yes to housing in their neighborhood. So I'd say the core functions of YIMBY orgs around the state should definitely not slack, in response to this package. And I sort of, I'm eager to see some of these bills and how they actually write the text, but I share some of your sentiments, Anthony, in that question personally. I think this is something that we should generally welcome from the pro tem. We shouldn't be overly critical of her because, again, it is probably more likely than not that these bills taken together will spur the production of housing that otherwise would not have occurred. But it's not going to get us to 2.5 million by 2025, or 3.5 million rather by 2025. And the internal estimate that I've heard is that this package would build 1 million, which what I was trying to say earlier is that would still leave us 2.5 million short by 2025. well, assuming existing production continues, we'd be about, I made 2 million short. So that's not acceptable. We definitely won't resolve our housing crisis by 2025 if that's the case, if all those numbers line up. And so, it's incumbent upon us as advocates who want to end the housing crisis to continue pushing for what we think will. And so I would definitely encourage us to be all the more unified and all the more vocal about what we think will do that in the coming months and years. I also would definitely urge folks on the call to be supportive of AB 3155. There are two sort of elements at play here. One, the Assembly just has more housing production bills right now than the Senate does, even with this package. A lot of the Assembly's bills are good. They haven't sort of tied a bow around them and called them a package in the same way that the Pro Tem has done for her House. But the Assembly has a significant number of housing bills that are good. And so we'll be pumping out some more information about some of those, but the cheap one there is 3155. That's probably one of the best bills in the legislature from the housing production standpoint, in my eyes anyway, right now. Second, as many folks will know on this call, the governor in his May revise on May 14th, announced his intent to offer seemingly his own streamlining and upzoning proposals. We've yet to get details about what that means, or I can send you the one paragraph where he says this in his May revise. But I can't speak to anything. You have the same information I have now. And so, we'll see. That's kind of another element in play here. And hopefully these sort of three bodies all compete to have the best production bill this year. And that means a more permissive bill at the end of the day. So fingers crossed. Krista, what's the likelihood of more tenant protections getting passed before the zoning? Some legislators used that as a reason to oppose SB 50 last year. It's true. Well, okay, yes. I think I won't doubt you that some legislators use that as a reason to vote against SB 50. I think advocates use that reason much, much more. And it was almost always a specious reason. In fact, I remember hearing Senator Skinner speak publicly about how 1482 should pave the way for SB 50, and that was something that she was telling her colleagues. I think there's always more room for more tenant protections. Folks will know that Assemblymember Ting has AB 828, which would sort of protect tenants that are being affected by COVID. I don't know necessarily enough about other people's intents here around tenant protection, but the bills going into COVID were substantially more on the production side than they were on the traditional tenants' rights side. Excuse me. So there just isn't too much on this in the legislative arena. One proposal that is, I think, one area rather that there is some movement on, especially from representatives of Orange County, is protecting tenants who live in mobile home parks. First example, Assemblymember Quirk Silva has a bill that would extend AB 1482's protections to those living in mobile home parks. It's a bill we support and would definitely encourage you to as well. That passed Assembly Housing this week, which was exciting, but who's to say? I can't forecast necessarily what's going to happen on the floor. Okay, is this the thing Tia Boatman Patterson said would kill the LIHTC market in California? I don't know, sorry. But I can follow up with you on that if we figure it out. And then how important is call-in participation for Tuesday's hearing? If important, will it be similarly facilitated to last week's Assembly Committee hearing? Henry, thank you for that question. So first off, thanks everyone who was able to call in for the Assembly Housing hearing. At this point, we're not planning to organize the call-in in the same way that we did for this week, in part because Senator Wiener chairs his own committee, and many of the bills there are probably going to be okay. It's certainly not as risky of a situation as 3155 was in last week. If you do have the time to join a Senate housing on Tuesday, the committee will begin at 9 in the morning. It's unclear yet what bills exactly they're going to hear and for how long they will go. But I will be on the phone. And if you would like to be on the phone as well, I would definitely encourage you to join. But I would rank it as a lower priority than I would joining the call for 3155 was this week. Hope that answers your question, Henry. It would be a delight to have you on the line. I think it's always nice to have additional voices. And at the end of the day, those people work for you. It's your Capitol building. It's your Senate Housing Committee. And so I'd encourage you to take a look. Krista, remind me again if realtors have supported AB 3155. I know that they've had some back and forth on this bill. I don't think I want to say they support the bill, but they're not super active on it. They certainly don't have concerns. The realtors, though, are in this sort of strategic position of focusing on other priority bills for them at this point, and they haven't super engaged on 3155 with us. So we've been some of the main focus on that in the Capitol, or on phone lines into the Capitol. Okay, so that's the update for what's going on this week. We can, Aaron, thank you so much for sharing this in the chat. There's a link that, Aaron sent around to SF Hack, has the San Francisco Housing Action Coalition has it on their website, which is wonderful and very helpful. I've been using that a lot. And so Aaron put that link in the chat if you'd like to download this and share it with your teams and orgs and friends and family, your mother, if you'd like. I encourage my mother to call in on Tuesday, or whenever day that was, the assembly hearing was. Anyhow, I don't see any more questions in the queue. So if you do have questions, you're more than welcome to ask them now, or we can get off a little early. And as always, you're more than welcome to email me or text me or call me. I'm going to put my email in the chat right now and my phone number. And so don't hesitate to use those. You will be surprised by how few people do. If you ever have questions, or you sort of review any of these bills yourself and you're like, Lewis, I don't think you got it right, or Lewis, what if we made this change? Like, more than encouraged to send that to me, especially via email, and that's really helpful. So that's about it for today. If you, like I said, have any questions, encourage you to reach out. But I don't see any questions coming in, so I think we might just end there, if that's okay.
All right. Thank you, Lewis, for jumping on. Thanks, folks, for signing in. I hope this was informative and you got the information that you needed. Obviously, you can always reach out. We're here to answer any questions that you have about legislation, and Lewis is very good at getting back to folks. So don't hesitate to blow them up with questions. Again, just appreciate you. Thanks to everyone. Again, I know Lewis mentioned it, but those of you that dialed in, it was just a beautiful thing to hear all those GMB voices on the line supporting coming out for 3155 and the other bills that folks weighed in on, which was great. Let's make sure that it's always good to have them hear our voices in Sacramento and know that we're out there, that we're holding them accountable.
Keeping an eye on them.
Keeping our good eye on them. Anyway, yes. Thanks everyone. Have a wonderful 3-day Memorial weekend. Hopefully you can find a way to get some barbecue and some outdoor time in a safe and social distance way. And we'll be talking to you soon. Thank you.
Thanks.